Okay, so we are working with our spot illustration, and our goal is to create something that is colored and free floating, so isn't cropped on any side, can be kind of viewed from any angle. And in order to get that, we first need clean line art, right? Before we can color behind that line art. And digital coloring, as I say in my slides here, which you can find under assignment sheets, digital coloring is coloring behind a real or implied outline. So before we can put in any color, we need clean line work, right? And you'll find this handout here under links if you want to download this for yourself. But we're at this stage where we're sketching and then trying to get clean line art so that then we can start coloring behind it. Now, the better our line art is, the cleaner it is, the easier it will be to add color. The fewer headings there will have. So what I did is I took my apocalyptic chicken sketch and I brought it into Photopea and I brought it into Vector, because you can create line art as vectors and you can create it as raster images. So it's up to you. If I use the pencil tool, I can create some nice hard-edged, very clean, very precise vector outlines. The problem is, in order to convert them to curves, I'd have to modify each of those anchor points individually. So I'll show you how Adobe Illustrator is kind of a better tool for that. You can do all of it.
Your mic is muffled.
Okay. I'll try to get a little closer to the computer. You can do everything that you can do in Illustrator within Vector, for the most part, for making clean line art. It's just a lot more burdensome in this program. So with the freeware options, a better option might be going to Photopea, right? And making sure you set up your image at a high enough resolution. I'm doing at least 10 inches by at least 350 pixels per inch. It says DPI, but that should be PPI. So that, and then on a new layer on top of my sketch, I'm making this clean line art. Think of it as digital inking. Now there's a wonderful tool within Photopea. And that tool is when you use the brush, you have this option for smoothing. And it automatically, so I just have a black brush here. Even though I'm just using a trackpad on a laptop, it automatically smooths out my stroke a little bit. If I want it even smoother, I can up that percentage. Now what I've noticed is this slows things down. So it's very helpful, especially if you have a really jittery hand. But because it's browser based, it can be really slow. See, but that's pretty darn smooth. That's not bad. But when your cursor starts to lag like that, that's problematic. But that's giving me some pretty clean line art that I can use and color behind. Another option is Photoshop and Illustrator, right? So if I open up Photoshop, let me show you this example. Turn off all the digital coloring stuff. Let me see if there's anything I can do about the sound. Maybe if I get closer to my router. Yeah, my sound levels are good, but I'm guessing it's just over the Zoom connection. So hopefully if I get a little closer to our router, it will work. And let me just close doors to other people.
And the end is after this.
All right, can you guys hear me a little bit better now?
Yeah, that sounds a lot better, Mr. Frey.
Okay. So you might get some kid noises, but we will try. Okay, so what we want, let's see, is just like in Photopea, we want to actually open up a file that's a large enough resolution if we're going to do our line art as a raster. And this is true for those of you using Paint Tool Sci or using Procreate or any other raster program to do your digital inking. The key is to get clean black line work, right? So we're going to create a new file in Photoshop, just like we would in Photopea. I'm going to spot illustration. Okay, I'm going to save it to the desktop. And I'm going to set up its size, its image size, to be at least 8 by 10 inches by 350 pixels per inch. In fact, I'll match what I was doing in Photopea. I'll make it 10 by 10 inches. I like composing spot illustrations within squares because that really kind of gives them the most versatility, kind of like a logo. Okay, now I have to find my sketch. It doesn't matter if you scan your sketch or if you take a photo of it or if you do a screen grab of it, because we are making it into the resolution we want. So here's my sketch, nice and big. And now we want to dim that sketch opacity a little bit. So I usually take it down to about 50%. And now I lock those layers, right? And build a new layer on top of it that I'm going to call my black. Now, how do I set it up within Photoshop for digital inking? I make sure that my foreground color is solid black, right? And you can do that just by clicking on the default box here. And then I'm going to use a brush tool. If you have Photoshop, you go to the brush tool and you can set your brush. Now, I am actually going to go grab my tablet because if you have Photoshop, it's also very nice to have a tablet with a stylus. Though you saw how you can do this in Photopea just with a mouse or with a trackpad, you can also do it that way in Photoshop. But the whole reason we have drawing tablets and styluses in the lab is because they make this process a lot more intuitive, just like you're inking on your own. So in order to make full use of the tablet, you want to use a brush that's pressure sensitive. So you can set it at a pretty large size. I usually do about the size of a pencil eraser. So at this resolution, that would probably be about 60 or so, yeah, or 70 pixels. And I want it at 100% hardness. And I want its opacity to be 100%, and I want its flow to be 100%. But you'll notice, unlike in Photopea, I don't have any smooth option for my brush here, right? Everything else is the same, but I don't have a smooth option. So now if I start inking, I want to make sure I have a pressure sensitive brush, right? So the harder I press, the thicker it is. And then you just ink just like you would with an ink pen. Now this processing goes a lot faster than Photopea, but notice it's picking up every little jitter in my hand. And I can correct it But without that smooth option, this can be tricky. You know, it's not going to look as clean. Now I can go back into it because this is raster. And I can use my lasso and I can actually delete from it and clean it up. But there's nothing that helps me smooth it out while I'm working on it, right? But let's say I'm just not all that concerned, right? I'm confident. I'm just going to ink away. Then I can get this all inked using this pressure sensitive brush in no time at all. And unlike inking with real ink on Bristol board or on vellum or in a sketchbook, I can erase if I want to, fully and completely. You know, so on and so on. Okay. That's one option. I'll keep that open. Another option is to use Illustrator. And this, if we were in the lab, this would be the thing I would want all of you to try. And there's two ways to make line art in Illustrator that I think are just wonderful. And the first is to do what Photopea is kind of showing you a simulation of doing. And it's, in Illustrator, it's called the blob brush. It's a paintbrush just like we can use in Photoshop, but we can control how much it smooths it out as we go. Okay, I have Illustrator open. So I want to open a new one. And I want it to be a print format. And it actually doesn't matter how big it is, as long as it's print. I'm going to close these. There's different coloring options. And what I need to do is, just like in Photoshop, I need to bring in my sketch. Is my mic doing better? You guys can hear okay?
Yeah, Mr. Frey, it's much better.
Good. Okay, so if I bring it into Illustrator, remember resolution doesn't matter in Illustrator, right? So I'm just going to center it. And then I can show layers. There they are. And I can actually double click on this and dim it just like I would with opacity to 50%, right? Then I can lock it just like I did in Photoshop. And I can put a new layer on top, and that new layer I can say is my Illustrator. And if you have a tablet, this is the way to do it, all in the computer to digitally. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the defaults to being a solid black fill and having no stroke. There we go. Solid black fill, no stroke. Then I am going to go not to the brush tool because the brush tool makes a new path every time you use it. So it makes kind of separate paths each time, like the brush tool in Vector. So instead, I'm going to use the tool right underneath the brush tool, which I wish Vector had. It's called the blob brush tool. And if you double click on the blob brush tool, you'll get the options, and you'll see